Welcome back to the Life on Books podcast. I'm your host, Tony. With me, as always, is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead. And joining us today is a man who some people suspect has paid me a lot of money, actually, to say nice things about his book. And they found it hard to believe that someone that reads books regularly came across one that they really enjoyed. Eskor David Johnson. And it was more a me, not that it wasn't believable that someone could like your book.
I saw I saw a few of those comments that you're getting some flack. So
yeah,
thank you for holding the fort. You know,
I love. I am a super like antagonistic person. So if someone comments something stupid, I just clap back immediately.
No, it's great.
So thank you so much for joining us. We're here in New York City, where you currently reside. We debated to do our normal segment to start, which is we just kind of start every episode with what are you currently reading. Andy thought it would be embarrassing if we asked you, and maybe you just aren't reading anything right now because you're buried in writing something. But
I wish. Currently reading. Actually, I'm very near. I'm closing in on the final pages of Ed Park's Same Bed.
Oh, awesome! Fantastic!
So full circle right there. I hardly need to tell y'all it's a fantastic ride.
Yeah.
It's been spurring my thoughts a lot just in a few. It's one of those books that it just calls into question, like, how did he even think to put all these strands together in the same place?
Yes, that'll be a big topic of the conversation when we interview. Because it's like, how did you write this, dude? I don't understand.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to spoil any of it now because obviously we're going to be talking to him tomorrow, but I went and saw him at one of the readings he did on his tour.
He was up there,
when he was in Newton, Massachusetts. And then actually on my way to Tony's this morning, I caught a bit of an interview he did on a podcast, and just listening to him talk about how the book came together was so cool. So
cool. Yeah. So Same Bed, Different Dreams. Andy, you're up.
I'm kind of a mixed bag of things. I just decided to put a couple books back on the shelf. I was so caught up in finishing JR by William Gaddis that I had kind of ignored some of the other reads I had going on, and kind of lost my track of what was going on within the book. And I knew we were going to be coming here this weekend, and I wouldn't really have time to get much reading done. And, I knew by the time we got back to New Hampshire, I would just not really remember anything. And I kind of, like Tony, I was telling you on the way down here, I've just got that like great book hangover where you finish a great book and nothing just really holds a candle to it. So I was just like, it's the end of the year.
Yeah.
It's about to be busy with holidays. I won't focus on really any major reads right now. I'll just kind of keep working on some of the smaller stuff. Keep picking away at the Spectre's Too Much of Life, and maybe get back to some of the McCroll novellas, which, Eskor, I know you're a huge fan of. So
perfection.
Yeah.
I was also going to say one good cure for the book hangover, because I get that a lot, and I think I missed the opportunity to savor many other books in my youth from a book hangover, in that I just read it right after something that was really good. So now I just go back and I reread something that I really like, that I've already read. And I don't need to reread the entire thing, but just until the hangover is gone.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, now I can step out of the bounds. So like I had the unfortunate kind of coincidence of reading The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
Excellent book, fantastic.
I've heard it's very good.
However, the day before I started it, I had just finished reading 100 Years of Solitude for the first time. And like, talk about a book hangover. Like, whatever book you read after that, it was gonna,
yes.
You know what I mean? So like, through no fault of Junot Diaz, and luckily I went back years later and reread it and really just like absorbed and sunk into it.
Yeah.
But the first time I was reading, I was just like, this isn't Marquez. Like, why isn't this not Marquez?
Right.
Because nothing is.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's funny you recommend that, because aside from Ed Park's novel, other than JR, there's really nothing that's kind of given me that like profound reading experience from cover to cover this year. And feeling that kind of those emotions while I was reading it, and towards the end of finishing it, it kind of planted that idea in my head, like I should go back and reread some of these other books that like really affected me and moved me. So I think that'll be something I'll get towards in the coming year.
Yeah.
I'm still working my way through Musashi. That's a long book. And I'm not a fast reader. And I'm reading The Hospital by Ahmed Bounani. Not sure. He's Moroccan.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. It's a New Directions publication. So, all right, we'll keep that.
Lovely bizarre. Is it in translation?
Yes.
Love books in translation.
Yeah, for sure. We have an episode about that. Well, it'll already be out by the time this hits the internet. But so let's get right into it. Your debut novel, Pay As You Go, came out this year. What was the actual release date on it?
October 24th.
So recently, we are here on December 16th. What? Just tell me, what did it feel like when you first the final manuscript was done and approved, and then once you actually saw it go to the shelves?
Yeah. I mean, those are so many experiences. Along the way, you're finishing it, you send it out. There's a lot of anxiety mixed in the way, but in terms of the high points, I remember the moment I first held it in my hand as an object, like what you have in front of you there, and it's one of those things it's gonna happen. By then you're well aware, you've seen the cover, you've been involved in typesetting and all of that, so it's gonna be a thing. But for me, it was I flew out to San Francisco for a book fair. My copies that the publisher was supposed to send to me were a bit delayed, so I was supposed to have gotten mine already, but it just hadn't happened.
Whoa!
So it was only when I went to this book fair that I was supposed to be that I was participating in, that I had to roam this labyrinthine hall until I found the table that McSweeney's had set up, and I just see dozens of copies and the vibrant blue of the cover, which I really love. And I don't know, it was all too expected, but all too surreal at the same time. Held into my hand, and it's undeniably great feeling. I wish I could be more blasé about it, but it felt great.
And just generally speaking, do you have what's the reaction been? I mean, I don't know that people are going to come up to you and say, "I hated your book." You know what I mean? But I think you can get a pulse on it sometimes, right?
The pulse is a great word, because I think the thing about the pulse is that it comes in intermittent flashes, right? So it's just been these moments of explosion and celebration, and all of a sudden it feels as if everyone's talking, especially on the pub day itself, or your friends, your family. We had a big reading that was great, but then it dies down, right? And then you realize that I guess based on the length and based on people's reading, it takes about I realized a month for people to kind of have actually read it. So then 1 month later, late November, then you start to hear back from people who've actually read it and who aren't just excited for their own sake or for your sake,
right?
That actually they've experienced the journey that you hope means something to them, and to find out that it did, and that it does. So that was another big wave, and now it's a slow trickle. It's like a humming pulse, which is very exciting. It's.
Well, I'll tell you, I obviously I've made some content around it now, and I was actually just looking at TikTok. I think the TikTok video has over 21,000 views, which I mean. Some people might say that's not much, but for my account, sometimes the video only gets 1,500 or whatever. So people seem to be interested in, the book. And then I logged into Goodreads just 2 days ago, and there was someone that I know, an acquaintance that I haven't spoken to in years. We just happened to be Goodreads friends, and I saw it. She marked as want to read, and it's cool. I don't think she even follows me on social media, so I think she probably just found it organically, which is cool.
Amazing. Yeah.
So
I've had a few people reach out to me as well and be like, "Hey, I picked this book up. I saw you recommending it and ranting about it." So
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the two of y'all, of course.
Well, we very much appreciate you sending us copies. And
I mean, we've talked if we don't like a book, we are reticent to just come out and say it in any on social media, whether it's a video or just a text description with a photo. But I'm also not going to say I love this book if I didn't love the book. You know what I mean?
Although I am now envisioning a podcast in which you invite authors of books you hate, just to
that's
see how they handle the pressure.
That does have.
Why did you do this?
Yeah, I
we
mean,
can just put some authors in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about it. There's loosely speaking, there's no such thing as a bad book. There's just books that are for you and books that aren't for you. But I do think that Pay As You Go is such a kind of universal story, I think, that people can appreciate. I don't know. For me, I'll have to sit down and really kind of think about, what I've read this year. But for me, it's probably in my top 3 for the year. So,
yeah, I would put it up very highly as well. It was great. I think just that kind of story of trying to find your way and a place to sleep at night was just so, even if it's not, universal and everyone has experienced something like that. I think that feeling of trying to find your place in the world that doesn't exactly seem to have a place for you is will resonate with a lot of readers. So
thank you. Yeah.
So tell us about how this became a story. Where did Pay As You Go begin?
Yeah, 100%. And one challenge that I ran into over the past few weeks, even over the past year, is like telling people what it's about, because I have a habit of downplaying. I say, it's about, it's a fictional city and a young man trying to find an apartment. Sometimes I call him a boy. So it depends on where you were when you were 25 years old. I think I was a 25-year-old boy.
Same.
There are 25-year-old men. I don't think Slide yet qualifies, but maybe by the end. Anyway, so I have this habit of like downplaying. Oh, it's just this, and I, obviously you hope that it's much more than that. The genesis of it, a few key ingredients. In an unusual turn of events for me, the title actually came to me first, which is not something I recommend to writers that they pursue or that they take as a route at all. I think the title more often than not tends to kind of spring up a little bit more organically when you're along the way in like a story. To have something like that in mind first can kind of curtail you. But for me, this was the one time that it did work out, and thank God it was this one time. In that I was spending part of my summer in Spain in 2010, and at the hostel that I was at, some of us had gone out like late at night to go on the beach and so on. And some people went to the water, some people didn't. I stayed on the sand while people were like in the water late at night. And one person who had left all their clothes on the shore, he comes back to find that all of his stuff is gone.
Oh God!
I'm talking about like his passport, his phone, his
no.
pants as well. And there was this really funny image of him like holding his head on the sand and like just screaming, and like his like balls are dangling because he has no pants. If you got to cut that as well.
No. You can swear. It's all good. You can say whatever.
Right. Anyway, sorry. So I swear this all has a point. So he had this really kind of like harrowing experience. And then that very next day, I'm going with him to the American embassy to kind of get his passport replaced. And I wish I remember his exact phrase, but he said something along the lines of, oh, yeah, man, sometimes you just have to pay as you go to something, something, something. And I just remember kind of remarking at the time, oh, that'll make a cool name for a short story. I thought something of that moment of him having just, lost everything, but having this attitude of like, let me just get to that next thing. So that was 2010. So this notion of pay as you go kind of became like a little bit of like a mantra. And then when I graduated college 2011, spent some time in New York, and, moving to New York is hard in general. Moving to New York without a job or a plan other than I'm going to be a writer, which is a horrible plan.
It's a little bit like, it's very common in New Hampshire when we grow up there. People always want to move to like the West Coast. I'm going to go to LA.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go be an actor. I'm going to go be a producer. That's a very common.
I had, growing up on Cape Cod, I had the same thing. I didn't necessarily want to be an actor or anything like that, but I was like, I'm going to go to college and the West Coast, and I'll stay out there.
So
and
it's the West Coast appeal in New Hampshire. Interesting.
It's getting out of New England is the appeal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You spend enough winters in there, and it's
But
just
I think
like
when you romanticize a career in New York, like writer is kind of that. It fits very nicely with New York.
Yes. Yeah, you have all these notions of all the salons that you're going to go in, and like you're wearing tweed for some reason, which to this day I don't own any tweed. Thank God. So yeah, but like moved here and just really was just trying to like find my way, trying to figure out like what it means to like have to live on your own or to look for a job, and how much more difficult writing was in and of itself away from school. And it was during that time I just began to hear this incessant voice in my head of someone who like really wanted something, and I had no idea what that want was. But and it didn't yet occur to me to connect that to the pay-as-you-go notion. But I think it was only after I had left New York for the first time, was kind of in grad school, and really wanted to return to New York as well. So it was that longing for New York, consistently hearing this voice who just wanted something. And then I kind of fell upon the notion of finding an apartment. Something that was able to be mundane enough to feel quite straightforward, but then allowed for a more kind of grandiose and magnanimous sequence of events along its way. As opposed to a grandiose goal, I think that kind of would have undercut, or it wouldn't have provided the as much room for grandiose events along the way. You're almost overdoing it. Yeah. So I needed that. It had to be something simple, but that the road there was kind of complex and complicated and a little bit more meaningful. So pay as you go, looking for somewhere, wanting to come to New York, and then the name Slide. That just kind of felt as if it was a character in and of itself, just on nature of the name. Someone who just moves, slides.
Yeah, I really liked the character of Slide. I thought he was great.
Yeah, there's a couple moments in the book where people kind of criticize him for maybe being a little juvenile or assumptive, I guess. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't really strongly pick on that. I was like, maybe I'm like him. Maybe that's why I didn't know.
I'm the guy.
Yeah, I'm the guy. I don't know.
I think I had a couple moments where I like recognized his naivete and was like, yeah, I was probably like that when I was in my early 20s and trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do next. So
yeah. No, one thing that I've said this a few times now, but now I'll say it on audio. So in an older version, I hesitate to call it a first draft because the story was so different. But in an older kind of like imagining of the novel, it was still called Pay As You Go, still with a character named Slide. But this character was, he was like older feeling, same age, but he felt older, and he was supposed to be like wiser as well, almost like jaded. And ultimately he was insufferable. You just didn't want to spend hundreds of pages with him, which I found out by having spent hundreds of pages with him. So for this version, I knew that I needed to make him like stupider but braver.
Yeah.
And perhaps those two are the same thing.
Could be.
And it was the combination of those two that I think allows for, yes, he has those moments of like juvenile unawareness, but at the same time, there is something, I would like to think, y'all can be the judge, that there is something that is endearing about him, and I do think it has to do with this bravery and this unceasing passion that he carries through.
I think, and I don't want to risk spoiling anything, but I think kind of hearing what you were talking about with your early draft, how he was a little bit more older and or wiser and jaded by the world around him, I think it's interesting that in the finished product, he was more naive and just didn't know much about anything. And then as the book kind of goes on, especially towards the end, he starts to become a little bit more jaded and scorned by the world. And I think having him start off so unsure about things, that really takes that moment where he starts to express those feelings of scorn and being jaded. It really elevates that whole section.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Before I forget, Andy, will you re-up the parking?
Yeah.
The host told me the parking tickets are like $115 out here.
No way. Wow.
Okay.
I got 4 more minutes.
Probably
New York for you.
I'll keep my eyes
probably
on
still
it.
cheaper than finding a parking garage.
Like in New York, once you step outside, it costs money just to be outside. It's ridiculous. Like
One might say you're paying as you go.
Hey,
I am paying as I go. So one thing I wanted to ask, and I saw you had mentioned in an Instagram post, like something about someone had written a review, and you said that you were like hesitant to use like the immigrant label, the immigrant story. And I didn't necessarily read Slide as an outsider. We don't really know exactly what his background is, right?
Intentionally so, yeah.
Yeah. And so I didn't necessarily read it like that. Do you find a lot of people just kind of assume it's like autobiographical in nature?
Thankfully, no. And that review that you are speaking of, I will say I was quite flattered by the review. It is they do seem to have enjoyed the book, so I'm ultimately thankful. But I did take issue with that one label, not because of its technical meaning. And if we do want to be technical, Slide, you get the ultimate impression that he has come here from somewhere else. He has come to Poland from somewhere else. And insofar as that's what the word means, then we can, in a legal sense, I guess, we can use it.
He doesn't seem totally like foreign to what, you know what I mean? Like some things, but not.
Yeah, he kind of seems like someone that, like what Tony was saying, was like moved from New Hampshire.
Right. If y'all moved here, no one will call you that, right?
Yeah. Right, exactly.
You're the transplant, or I think
they might call us some other unfriendly epitaphs, but nothing.
Yeah. And so this is less of a commentary, I think, on the novel, and more of just, I think, the state of the publishing market, if you will. And I think, and maybe it's just a practical offshoot, because there are so many books out every year. There's so many authors. There's so much writing that there's almost necessarily a kind of shorthand that arises in order to talk about certain books or certain authors and so on. And Immigrant is one of those labels that, when used in describing a piece of fiction, it's more often concerned with fiction that, characters from a brown country come to the U.S. and it's so much, and they're like so in awe of the U.S., but then they miss their homeland, and it's like finding your new home in this complicated place. And I have a theory that the main appeal of writing of that sort to the audience, so readers at large, is just to, pat themselves on the back for A, look at me, I'm reading this, and then B, isn't America so great? And that is not a statement on the quality of the writing, some of which are excellent.
Sure, yeah.
But I just think that is the kind of audience and market kind of need that a lot of those stories are kind of positioned to scratch.
Yeah.
And mine was decidedly not about that at all. Though, you could point to like some overlaps in terms of someone coming to a new place. But the label itself, I think, has more baggage than I was inclined to take on.
Yeah, we've talked about this before on a few different episodes and also off the air. Like, it just seems like so much of modern publishing is just, let's boil the book down to a handful of buzzwords. And
well, it serves its purpose from a marketing perspective to label the book so as an audience member if it's for you or not, I guess.
Yeah, and like you were saying, there's so many of these other immigrant stories that are so very clearly that.
Yes.
And they are good novels, but they're, like, again, you said, very clearly about an immigration story. And where yours is someone new in a city, we don't really know where from. It is, I don't say unfortunate, but it seems a little like almost lazy to kind of pick that
is a great
that
word.
Buzzword versus so many other things that could be attributed to the novel.
Yeah, it's a hero goes on a journey.
Right.
We talked about that last week.
It is a very like coming of age story. And we actually talked about that in one of the last episodes we recorded, like how popular those are. And it doesn't seem like labeling your novel as a coming of age story would really detract from any buyers or readers, I should say. So
it's funny when you were describing the kind of tropes of the immigrant novel. I didn't realize it until you were saying it, but Americana by Chimamanda.
Great.
Great book, but it kind of is that, right?
Yeah, I'll give her a little bit more credit in that, you know, she's very consciously taking on those assumptions and those complications. Now, some pieces of work that take on tropes end up becoming the trope themselves,
right?
Which I don't forgive you for doing that. It's like, well, you failed in taking it on because now you're just another example.
Yeah.
But in Americana, I do think that she succeeds in exceeding the nature of the trope.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, I think you're right.
My favorite thing about that is that it was just like a love story when it was all said and done. It does lure you in at the beginning with a lot of these meditations on race in America and so on, which again, that's part of the quintessential ingredients of the trope. And like how different things are in America versus your homeland, and don't you miss going back, but you need to make your money in America and so on. But I think once in that novel, once you kind of digested that and incorporated it into like the fabric of these characters' lives, it was just like a beautiful love story.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really did. So going back to Pay As You Go. Speaking of,
that's why we're here.
Speaking of Slide and some of the other characters, I thought the names of the characters were very interesting.
Hey.
And it reminded me of 100 Years of Solitude in that the kind of just almost like the ridiculousness of some of the names. And then I saw in the acknowledgments, like you kind of were like, really gave a good shout out to Marquez. Yeah. So was that, what was the inspiration for some of the names?
Yeah. I'm trying to curtail myself from answering like 5 questions at once, because you mentioned Marquez as well, which all of my friends know is like my trigger to get me ranting. But no, the names, like I struggle in real life keeping track of people's names if they are very, common names. No offense to the two of you. I know your names, so we're good to go.
Oh, look, I know way more Andys than Tonys. Okay, all right, all right.
Shots fired.
Maybe not in New York. Maybe not in New York.
I actually also know more Andrews and Andys than Tonys. So
Tony's probably common around here, but
hey. But like so it's hard enough for me like in real life because there are so many like names that slip my mind. So then especially if I'm like taking a departure from real life, which is what fiction I think at its best can be or should, not totally partial that you forget the world, but that you're able to make a new world to learn something of your own. Then like why would the writer waste our time coming up with names that are just like that are going to like slip from my mind like once more? So I love kind of like I love names that are a little bit offbeat, but I could still argue like aren't super like I'm not making up words, right? It's like these are names that you can encounter in real life.
Yeah.
It's just like maybe the odds of this many oddly named people in one place.
Yeah.
Begin to.
You want to talk about tropes? I mean, there's I guess a stereotype of like millennial white people of like what we're naming our kids.
Oh yeah, what are the contenders?
Well, God, I can't believe I'm going to say.
There's a lot of names ending in like Lee now, but spelt Leigh.
Oh,
that's a thing.
Well, so I'll give an example. My wonderful fiance's niece is named Emilia, and so it's kind of like a hybrid between Emily and Amelia.
Right,
and then
right.
It's just like people are like, well, why didn't you just go with Emily? Or it's just stuff like that. Or Braden, Caden,
lots of
Braxton, or like I don't know.
Yeah. A lot of country club names.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, but at the end of the day,
just planning for their future job interviews. They want to make sure the resume floats to the top.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, like, aren't all names made up? Like,
exactly. Yeah. Like I worked for a while as a middle school teacher in the South in Arkansas in a primarily black school, and as one would expect, you have a lot of what I would call like black African American names. You have like Devontae, Cavante, Ashariah, and so on. And I remember like one teacher in one time in a moment of like frustration, kind of like shouting, I'm like, why can't they just have like regular names?
Oh boy.
And I got like,
yikes.
and I got like, so like, I was like, yeah, well, like, what's like a normal name? Now listen, in full transparency, in my private time, I would kind of like, laugh at some of these names. But I was doing that to myself privately, and I knew I was kind of like, being an asshole almost.
Yeah.
But to kind of like hear it kind of like declare it out loud as if it was like, common parlance.
I have to ask though, was this person white?
She was.
That's bad.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Right.
Because there's a connotation there that, you know what I mean? Like,
but I like bring it up because you said all names are made up, right? But I guess it just depends on like how long your made up name has been allowed to kind of like exist and become like a standard. Have you ever read The Shipping News by Anne Proulx? I don't know how her last name is said. She has a lot of unusual names in that book as well. I won't get into it too much, but she kind of made that comment that a version which I just said, which is like, why have these regular names when you're taking a break from your real life? I don't know what to say. I just like them. I
do too. Yeah.
They like just flow off the tongue. I read my work aloud when I'm writing, so sometimes I just need like a sound that kind of like flows well. It's also nice to alternate them with just very like straightforward names.
Yeah.
So Sly's original roommates, you have Calumet, which is a Native American pipe. I don't know if you know, which it's the name for a kind of pipe. But I was like, that could be someone's name.
Absolutely.
And then the other one is Eustace.
Which
I mean, that's a regular name, but like, when have you ever met someone named Eustace?
You know what's funny is the only I've never met anyone named Eustace, but if my memory is serving me correctly, that is the husband in Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Oh.
And so as I was reading, like that is who I was picturing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Granted, it's been a long time since I've seen that show, but it really seemed like the character in the book was lining
that guy.
Yeah.
A curmudgeon in the making.
It was very much a perfect name for that character.
Yes. Yeah.
That's just kind of very like anal particular.
Yes. Yeah. So. Yeah. I just felt as if the names. In fact, maybe I should answer this a little bit more. So now that the names are there, I can say, they're like just fun. But I do remember those moments of having to come up with a new character's name. And like, you see the character first, you know who you want them to kind of like be or do, or at least the criteria you want them to fill in this particular moment. But then you need the kind of the corresponding sound, which ends up being a name, but the corresponding sound, I think, is the way that I kind of experience it from a writer's like point of view. The one example I'll give is towards the end, Slide meets this kind of hot shot kind of PR marketing agent type person who's like, very much, picture your Hollywood agent always on the phone type person. And I remember I needed him to be that. That's where I needed that character to be, and I needed a name that kind of had that bombast to it. And that character's name is Xander Durant. And there's something about the X at the start and the Xander Durant, the like kind of that sound, like a double intonation coming at you almost. So that'll be an example of how those names kind of like fit into the required kind of moment and feel.
Yeah, I would say all of the characters seemed very appropriately named to me. There weren't really anywhere I was like, that doesn't seem like a name that would fit this type of person. So
thanks. Yeah.
The gang leader is
Peter Napakakos.
Sorry, the pronunciation gets me.
I thought it was also very funny that like all of the underlings all had kind of
ridiculous
caricature like nicknames, and then he was just his full name.
Yeah.
But that sounds like a gang leader, like I don't know. Just sounds like the dude that he's in charge. You know?
Yeah. You know, there was something I enjoyed about that so much. Yeah, because all like everyone else is like Ugly God, Siren, Monsoon, Paramount, Two Piece, Tank, Kid Vicious, and so on. He's just Peter Napakakus.
And are you a punk music fan? Was that a Sid Vicious reference?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
You know what a lot of the names kind of reminded me of is two things. Is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because Shredder's like mutants are Bebop and Rocksteady.
Yes.
And those kind of like, have the same like vibe to them.
Yes.
And then it also kind of reminded me of like Vinny Paz, the rapper, his kind of crew, Army of the Pharaohs. Like all those guys have like weird names like that.
It reminded me of Wu-Tang.
Okay,
Little
Just
bit,
because
yeah.
mostly
Yes.
every time I came across Ugly God, I kept thinking you God.
Yeah.
And like,
right.
So then it's just like kind of, it's just all these kind of like, not funny, but over exaggerated names.
Yeah.
And every time I read Ugly God, I was like, you got this.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
Wu-Tang.
I think I was saying to you in our DMs that like that stretch with the gangsters is probably my favorite.
It was my
Yes. Yeah. For sure. I think you were saying that, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the title of the section, but
Millennium Mount.
yes.
And Petit Julien.
Yes, Julianne was my favorite section when they're actually back to the city, and Slide is having that kind of crossroads moment where he's starting to find his place, but it's a little bit not the right place. Like he's starting to figure it out, and then it doesn't seem like it's the right for him.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that recurring theme throughout the book of like people always wanting to take a piece, take their piece, even if they're not really deserving of it. Was that intentional?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think with the exception of one character who I'll say at the end, there aren't any like bad people. There aren't any like intentionally cruel people.
Like even the gang, they have like their kind of rules, and if you play within those rules,
then
we're all friends. It's all good.
Should be fine. Right. So, and the one exception is Ugly God. He's just mean, and I just love that he's just mean. Like he's not trying to like. But
I would like to add the inspector. Yacht. I didn't like him. Which,
Good,
yes. But like I wouldn't characterize, and this is just me as a reader, anything that he was doing as like noble and pure. He was this spiteful bureaucrat.
Yes.
I didn't see any good in him.
And it isn't that the others have to be noble or pure, but I think everyone, all of the characters, they're doing what they think is best for them.
That's
and
a good way
maybe
to
for
put
the
it.
people that they immediately care about.
Sure.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think one thing about being in a big city is that we are simultaneously, we're in collaboration and competition. The person who holds the subway door open for you at 8:05 is the person who's in front of you in line for the interview that you're on your way for, right? And it's that constant kind of interplay between those two that I think makes a city so rich, makes it so dynamic, but kind of like rich extreme, and the novel, makes a more exaggerated stance on it. You do have these dynamics play out where everyone's going to share with you only in so much as they need to. But maybe if they see that it's something that you can do for them, then they might share some more, or they might take advantage, depending on kind of like how things play out. That happens to Slide a lot. And in all fairness, I do think Slide does a bit of that himself as well. I think it's fair game ultimately.
I think something about the way Slide goes about it, it feels less intentional.
Yes.
He's just trying to find solid ground.
Yes.
And, doesn't realize that he's stepping on someone else to get
someone's
there.
toes. Yes.
Whereas the other characters, it's a little bit more clear that they are trying to manipulate someone to get to a specific end for themselves.
Agreed. the argument, that's how I feel, and that's what I would love people to feel while reading. I liked Slide while I was writing. I don't think characters in novels need to be likable. I think it's one of the terms that gets thrown about way too much. With that said, I did happen to like Slide a lot while writing him, and I hope others do too. But then at the same time, I'm curious as to whether or not it's because we end up liking him, if we're liable to have that interpretation. To give an example, at the beginning with his roommates, there's a version of things that one can argue that from Eustace's point of view, he was just a guy who was trying to like lose weight, go on dates, and like keep like an orderly home that was well lit. Then he has this roommate who shows up who's complaining all the time, doesn't like that there's no juice in the fridge, which is a solvable problem. Go buy some juice. Like he's complaining about he's like ruining the date. He turns off the lamps. He's causing all of this commotion for someone who was just really trying to get their life in order.
Yeah.
That's an argument that can be made. And I actually like Eustace a lot as well, kind of like for that reason.
This part made me laugh out loud when it's right in the beginning of the book and Slide's complaining and Calumet says, "Ooh, for fuck's sake, man, you've been here for a week."
Yes.
And then it's like, so as he's complaining, I was kind of like, yeah, that sucks, man, like for sure. And then it's like, you've been here for a week. And you're like, all right, dude. Like,
right.
He
So
doesn't know any better. Like he just
like shows up and like you kind of imagine that he like, oh, cool, I'll stay here. And then like later that same day,
right,
he has to have like started complaining, right? Now we get it from Slide. So again, I would like to think we do like him. But there is a bit of that kind of stepping on toes, a little bit of an inconveniencing that I'm not sure we're allowed to give him a full pass on that.
Yeah,
I think I had a bit of a moment of reflection, like in some of those earlier passages where you kind of recognize, like, okay, it's a young kid in a new place who thinks he's the world is his oyster, and he knows what he's doing. He's gonna, get this apartment. He's gonna have his dream job. He's got everything figured out, and it's like you don't know anything yet
at all. Yeah.
And I think that is what is so one of the things that's so redeeming about Slide as a character. It's not malicious.
Yes.
He's not trying to like actively screw over Eustace and Calumet.
I agree.
He's just like, this is crazy. Like, why do the lights have to be on?
Yes.
Because he doesn't understand anything.
Yes.
And as the novel progresses, he starts to figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. He means well.
yes,
He does.
And I think that's ultimately, so even if he does cause harm or commotion or annoyance, I think that's why you kind of give him a pass.
Yeah.
So you had just said something about how you wanted people to feel a certain way when, reading specific parts. When some writers write, they write completely unapologetically. They don't care. This is the book I have to get out of myself. Some people write to create some type of societal change or whatever. What would you say is the reason why you wrote Pay As You Go? And what do you want people to think or feel when they're reading it or when they finish?
That's a good question.
That could have been the entire podcast, the length it might take me to answer this. Well, the first reader is yourself. I think that's very important to keep in mind. So for a very, very long time, this is for anyone who's writing anything from scratch, you have to convince yourself before anyone else that this is worthy of being written and worthy of being read. So I wanted a story that I think felt true to some of my experience being alive. And I want a story that I felt was representative of who I was as a writer. I think going back to that first failed version, I said that was kind of one of the main things, is that I had been too concerned in that failed version of like writing something great. I had just gone to grad school in Iowa, and like you hear or you feel as if you're supposed to be doing something amazing while there. So I started from much more of an external place, and amongst the many reasons why that one failed, that would be one. But for what we have in front of us now, it did come from a much more internal place. And for me, both the writing and the reading, but probably more so the writing of it, it became an instruction manual of like how to live, of how to endure. My life at the time was totally centered around the book. I was living in a small studio in the Upper West Side. I'd wake up at like 5:30 in the morning and try to get my 2-3 hours in. And it felt as if, if I can keep slide going and if I could make sure that slide's okay and makes it to some next place, then maybe I'll be okay. And it had the adverse effect of like, if ever by the end of the morning's writing, Slide was like in trouble somewhere or he was in like a complicated spot, and then I'd go out to be hanging out with all my friends, I'd feel bad.
You left him hanging?
Oh no, I have to go back and take care of Slide in the morning. But, without putting too fine of a point on it, I think, and this is likely true for many writers writing their first novel, you don't yet know. You're taking yet another gamble. You're hoping that this is the one that like pays off. So I wanted for me, it became important to write a story that made me believe that big dreams were possible and that gave me the courage to face an unforgiving world. One that may not care that you're chasing your dream, that it may not care that you're trying to be a writer or the top podcaster in the world.
It's a goal. It's a goal.
Hey, but you're the one that has to believe in that first. You are the first reader. You are the first one that needs to say, this is something that's worthy of being shown with the world. And the story itself, in this particular instance, the story itself was one that helped me to believe that, and that I hope for whatever it may be for any other readers that come across is whatever that thing is, whatever that notion, that pursuit, that the world is kind of like putting obstacles in the way between you and it, to show that it's possible. The persistence is key.
I mean, I certainly felt that way reading it. I also felt like it was the first book I've read in a while where I was like, I got to get home so I can read and find out what happens next, And there was many more twists and turns than I kind of anticipated.
Yeah,
because it doesn't like read as like initially doesn't, you don't get that like feel on it. Like, oh, it's a book that's really gonna like have like I don't want to say like a surprise ending or you know what I mean, but it's not The Sixth Sense or something.
Yeah.
But
I think the term that Ed used to describe it, where he called it a mock epic, is just perfect. Yes. Because like, if you look at it, like it is quite the epic adventure. Like he deals with some pretty zany and absurd and chaotic situations and gets himself wrapped up into some pretty serious business. And then you kind of zoom out and you're like, he's doing all of this to get an apartment.
Yes.
He's doing all of this to get an apartment and a barbershop.
Yes.
Well, to Slide's credit, when we were driving here today from New Hampshire to New York City, we did not know where we were going.
There you go.
I was thinking about that. We had a very slidey-in adventure to get here.
Let's go.
And, it's like, okay, it's one night. It's New York. There's a bajillion hotels, and we would have figured it out. But it is a little unnerving. Like, I don't know where I'm laying my head at the end of the day.
For sure.
I walked into his kitchen this morning. He goes, so I'm not sure where we're staying tonight. And I was like, what?
Perfect. That's the best way to arrive to New York.
Yeah.
It's how we all do it. There's a lot of plots.
Yeah.
The plots in this matters. It's not a thriller. It's not like a murder mystery.
Right.
But it isn't. It isn't one of those novels that are so concerned with like the character interiority that it doesn't matter what really happens. It's more what they're thinking and experiencing. I think it is about what he's thinking. It is about what he's experiencing, but it's also about what happens, and it's also about the sequence of events that unfolds. One of my favorite writing teachers, people will know it, Paul Harding. I'm saying as if like he's some guy. But Paul Harding, he would always say in his class, more is more, which I was one of those people you didn't need to like tell me twice, but I loved the phrase of it. 'Cause I think my instincts were like already there. So if a novel can have, fantastic characters and moments of insight and interiority and a great plot and great descriptions, and if all those are able to kind of like hold themselves in a relational web that doesn't collapse, then you have something that's, I think, even more substantial than one that might be lacking any one of those things.
Well, I know, Andy, you wanted to ask Eskor about his time at Iowa. You had told me that Paul Harding was one of his professors, right?
No, the opposite. You told me
Did
that.
I tell you that?
Yes.
I found out about it, and I was like, oh man, because Paul Harding, I read Tankers a couple years ago, and I thought it was just crazy good.
No, he's great.
I haven't read his 2 newer works yet, but so
I would just, it's one of those things like I've always kind of, as I've gotten a little bit more into the world of literature and tried to force my way into the literati, like it's always one of those things I've kind of heard like, the Iowa Writers Workshop. And I would I would just love to hear a little bit more about what the experience was like. And if there was any big takeaways from that really helped with this novel.
Yeah, for sure. So I start off by saying like, I started off very like anti the entire notion of it. And a little, that part of me still kind of like still exists. I haven't like snuffed it out entirely. I think, and doubtless you've heard this. There's a lot of conversation around MFAs. Oh, they like get everyone to like write the same, and they like they like kill real talent and so on. And I do think that for Iowa, there was a period in time in which I think those arguments had a little bit more weight to them, in that the previous director of the program was one of those kind of like larger than life, kind of like terse American prose in the vein of like Cheever and Hemingway and so on, who kind of encourage everyone not so subtly to write like that. So there was a little bit more of a school style, I do believe, and I think that's where so much of that rhetoric has evolved. But for quite a number of years now, that old director was Frank Conroy, and now there's Sam Chang. And to her great credit, I only know the workshop under her, and it's such a much more like diverse and interesting and like multifaceted place than you would ever imagine, especially in terms of the writing that comes into there. But anyway, so I used to have my hang-ups, and then kind of, after it had been 3 years outside of school, not really knowing how it is I was going to like find the time and the space to write, I eventually, like after a pep talk from my dad, I kind of like gave in and applied to MFA programs. And then being at Iowa was just like absolutely incredible and was way different than anything that I could have imagined. The number one thing, and it's easy for me to say this, but you have to experience it. The number one thing is just like the time. There's this kind of endlessness in the feeling of the time there. It's not just that you only have one class that you have to be at per week, which is workshop. And some people even skipped workshop, very few. But there were some people who like, there's one person I could think of who I only know by name, never saw them the entire time. Apparently they were
call.
They were never at workshop, they were never anything, and they were just there at the same time, and they were just like, I'm just gonna stay in my room. But like, so it's entirely funded. They give you a monthly stipend. You have to be at this one class per week in which one person's story or novel excerpt is up for review, which you would have like read beforehand, and then it's just a bunch of like writers and aspiring writers like around the table talking about the given work, either your own or someone else's. So now my stance to people who complain about MFAs are like, if after 2 years of like unlimited time and like peers around you and nothing to do but read and write and think and talk about writing, you're not a better writer, that's your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your
How
fault.
can you do something every day and not get better at
The
it?
programs call your bluff.
Right.
You've been here the entire time. You're saying, oh, if only I did, if only this, if only that. Cool. Here's all the time in the world. Here's no monetary concerns to care about. And here are brilliant peers who are here to talk about writing at any given point in time. What are you going to do?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what it kind of like really was helpful for me. Yes, there were great things said in moment to moment and like workshops and so on. But funnily enough, the 2 years, so I was there for 3 years. You could stay for a third year. I applied for funding. But the 2 years I was actually part of the program was when I was working on the failed draft. Meaning that there's nothing that I actually got feedback on in workshop that was actually like practically useful to me in terms of like a final product. But it was just like the act of just getting to talk about writing, think about writing consistently for so long meant that like when it came for my third year and I kind of stumbled upon the new first sentence, which kind of like freed me to begin on this new draft, I felt so much more, I felt ready in a way that I think had I not had that time to make glorious mistakes for 2 years, I wouldn't have like arrived at. So it's just 2 years to like fail at things, which is great.
I like that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always thought was funny is the wrong word, maybe closer to ironic, is like we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Like you think of someone going off and becoming a writer, you assume they're going to New York or California or Chicago or some kind of metropolitan area. Yeah. And then like one of the hotbeds is just in Iowa. In probably near a cornfield. It's just like
so boring there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's like existentially boring. Like
Yeah, I've driven through there a few times.
that's the best way to do it.
And at my day job, we deal with a lot of vendors that are based out of Iowa, and I've joked before. There's really nothing to do there but build shit and grow corn. Like it
accurate
and
those two things
fail
go
at,
together,
and
so.
fail at writing. So
Yeah. But shout out to everyone from Iowa. Love y'all.
There's gonna be a hit out on it.
Yeah. I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be allowed to go back now. But I think like boredom is so useful. Like we like don't get bored anymore. And I'm saying I'm including myself in this because I'm much more. Everyone's heard this. I'm full on Instagram, podcast, But even like if I'm walking from the subway to here, I'm gonna like resume my podcast. Right. But like Iowa, it's just this beautiful, heavy, ubiquitous boredom.
yeah.
It's so quiet. Like on weekends, yeah, you could go out, but like who cares?
Well, we were talking about this on the long ride down from New Hampshire about how like people don't have really super concentrated skills at anything anymore. We were talking about someone that Andy's work that's just like can fix anything, if it's got a motor or whatever. And it's like, back in the day, there was literally nothing else to do with your time other than to master a skill.
Yeah.
And now you can just be endlessly entertained where you're not going to spend a lot of time just working on one skill set.
Yeah. No, it's becoming rarer and rarer. And someone made a good. Sorry, just one quick. Someone had made a comment one time. Is like hobbies no longer exist. Like anything that you invest enough time into to consider a hobby,
Monetize.
It's like a side hustle.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It sucks.
Which is different because when something's a hobby, like writing started for me, yes, a passion, but it was like a hobby. I had homework that I should have been doing when I was like writing like novels when I was like 14 years old, or, you know what I mean? But there's something about a hobby that allows you to kind of like fuck around in that sense, and that's where you really become like, that where you begin to develop expertise. I was about to call myself an expert, but I will not do that.
I mean, you are a published author. You did go to Harvard, if I read correctly on the internet.
But not for writing.
What was your undergrad?
English. So
Oh, well, I mean, come on.
Close enough.
Yeah, I think that is a real problem is everything gets monetized. And that was kind of a concern for me when I kind of started to make content around books. Like I've always been very transparent about the fact that if I can leverage this into like making enough money, I will do it. But if it doesn't happen, like oh no, I just read a bunch of books I liked.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
talked about it,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Very early in 2023, because Tony had started his Instagram page and was doing well with that and enjoying it. And there are not just Tony, but a number of other creators who either do things on Instagram or more particularly YouTube, a little bit longer form content. I was like, you know, like that might be fun. Like I want to engage more with what I'm reading, and I want to discuss it more than just like watch the books read counter on Goodreads go up. And I was like, yeah, you know, I'll make a YouTube page. And I pretty quickly threw in the towel because I was losing all of my time working on the YouTube page. So like all of the free time that I would have had to read was going towards, and I was very green in this side of things. So like the technical stuff, like editing the videos and things like that, like I was just struggling with that. And I was like, you know, I'd get home from work and have an hour and a half to read, and I would or an hour and a half of free time, and I would spend, you know, an hour of that trying to like edit a 5-minute clip because I didn't know what I was doing. And then I was like, I'm losing all of my time to read.
Good reading time,
To try to like not necessarily make a side hustle out of my hobby, but like expand it and do this. And I was like, I just want to read and engage with the book. So like, you know, maybe things will be different in the future. And this podcast is certainly helping me with that. But it was just like, I just want to read.
I struggle with that so much because I have interest. Like I'm interested in like photography.
Which we're going to talk about.
Hey, I would love to make film as well. So I mess around on Adobe sometimes and Premiere. I mean. During the pandemic, I started to learn how to like code like for a bit, just cool. I'm just curious and so on. But I think back to LeBron James had this great quote one time. He said, "Keep the main thing the main thing."
Yeah.
And in his particular context, it was like once you become one of the most famous and successful athletes in the world, then there's like business and film and so on and so on. But the thing that has enabled him to even have opportunities along those lanes is the fact that he's so good at basketball.
Yeah.
And when those things start to cut into like basketball practice time, that's when you start to kind of like squander it all, in basketball included. So for me, it's been a practical kind of like lesson I've had to kind of learn over the years of like, the only thing I stand a chance at being great at is writing. And for me to, reach those heights or to practice my arts to the extent and to the depths that I envision and enjoy and that I've enjoyed reading, it's going to take like a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of reading. It's going to take a lot of like trial and error and so on. And anytime that I get like, I start to see that I'm absorbing myself into being like, I need to like write this screenplay and like, take these pictures and make like a vlog of what I'm doing and so on. It's like, but like, is that the main thing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I do want to allow variation, but sometimes it runs to the extent that like I'm beginning to dilute my central creative drive.
So what does being great at writing mean to you?
Ooh, never been asked that.
How do you define that? When will you know that you've made it?
I don't think
into greatness.
I don't think. Well, it's never going to be for me to say. I can say when it's not, and I think I have great moments as it stands right now. There's a notion that I talk about with all of my writing friends, the echelon. This is also a word that I just like saying. But writing that is of the echelon, you're so clearly in the hands of a master that there's a quieting of the mind that happens. Every time I open a book, a brand new book, whether I want to or not, there are these unspoken questions that I have here. If the book starts off going well, even before I start, I'm asking the author and the book, do you know what you're doing? Even if it starts off well, I'm like, okay, how long can you maintain this?
Yeah.
Even as it's going along, and sometimes even in books that I really, really like, I wouldn't name any, but even books that I love, those questions linger the entire time. Can you pull this off? Even down to the very last page. They may have pulled it off, but they never gave me that assurance from the very get-go that they will. So there's something about certain, and I'm not sure if it's the quality of the prose, the assurance, or the authority of the writer, what have you, but there's that level of prose and level of storytelling that writers can reach. That from the very first pages, those questions, they kind of stop. I stop feeling as if I'm in competition with anyone, and I'm just allowed to just be swept up by a story. I feel as if my soul is being taken care of. So insofar as I could do that for others.
Oh, that's all? That's
it?
Yeah.
Shouldn't be that hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Pay As You Go is definitely a good start. I think it's a durable book in the sense that there's some stuff that I read that I'm like, yeah, cool, liked it, great, whatever. I'll probably never think about it again. Or if you were to read it 5 years from now, it would already feel dated. Or maybe it felt dated when I read it, even though the writing was fine. But I feel like Pay As You Go is kind of it's such a human experience that it's very, it doesn't really have, I mean, you don't even really necessarily know exactly what time period the story is taking place. I mean, there's some stuff with the virality.
It's like the internet,
Yeah. But I mean, other than that, it's, you don't feel like you're stuck in a particular period. So I think you've taken the first step perhaps to the echelon.
Hey, appreciate that. Yeah, it takes me so long to write. I'm a slow writer. So that when I was writing this, I was like, well, it needs to be a story that even if it takes me 20 years, it'll still be fine. So I would like to think that, regardless of when it came out, it would still be, worthy of being part of the cultural conversation.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of characteristics in here that make it a good part of that conversation. So, and I think it's got the legs to last for quite some time.
Hey. Time is a real test.
Time is a test for sure. Like you said earlier, there's just so much coming out now with just everyone. It's so easy to self-publish, and the volume of writing coming out, it's hard to keep up with. And I talked about this in the video I made about Pay As You Go. Is I almost didn't read the book because I had just finished reading Same Bed, Different Dreams, and I get a lot of people. This sounds so cocky, but I get a lot of people messaging me. Will you read my book? And I take it pretty seriously because if I'm going to say yes, I want to make sure I have the time to do it, give it a fair shake. And I was like, man, I really have this huge stack of books I'm thinking about reading. And I was like, well, let me take a look and read a little bit about it. And then I saw Ed, you were friends with Ed, and I was like, well, I mean, Ed's books blew me away. So I was like, if he's friends with this guy, it's probably a good start, right? And so I'm so glad that I did. Yeah. Do you have any other writing related questions? Because I want to talk about let's see. I want to talk about Trinidad and Tobago, photography, and jiu-jitsu.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. I will also say on the note of sorry, let me just say this once more. Thank you all so much for responding to my messages. And having us all here. But yeah, I would also and I hope Pay As You Go does that. It's my belief that if I could just get you to the first page, I think it's really hard because again, as you were saying, there's so many messages that you might have and so on. But if I can get you to the first page, I think what the book wants to do is just to hook you and just take you forward.
Right. Well, but it's not just, networking with people on the internet. It's when your book's sitting there on the shelf and someone's looking at 50 other books right in front of them. They all have cool covers and flashy, subtitle or headings or whatever. And so, I mean, I do think that this is quite a nice looking book.
It's a great looking book.
I don't want to get too deep into like, you know, the publishing aspect, because I like to think of us as a podcast for readers, not writers necessarily. But somebody had messaged me and was like, what did you really think of that book? I said, I really liked it. He goes, well, I just, you know, McSweeney's. And I was like, I don't know any, you know, I looked at their catalog. I was like, I don't really necessarily recognize anything else on there. And I said, what's your beef with McSweeney's? And they didn't say it, but I kind of felt like they were saying like it's too woke, and I was just like, "All right, man." Like, maybe I'm misinterpreting what he was saying. I don't want to mischaracterize this random person that messaged me, but I just thought that was interesting. And I was like, "Look, dude, like you know how hard it is to get a book published. Like someone wants to publish your book, you know, unless they're like an original publisher of Mein Kampf, you're probably gonna, you know, sign off on it. So
no, and it goes back to what we were saying in the earlier part of the conversation, right? So many of these labels, right, whether it's like immigrant or so on and so forth, it's like it's these shorthands that are going to lure some readers and they're going to push some readers away and so on, because everyone is just looking for whatever kind of like personal algorithm that allows them to sort through like so many. So for one person, it's like, oh, McSweeney's, that must mean something. What it might mean to them, I can't possibly say. And it's why like I get publishing, it's a necessary industry. Marketing is like very necessary and so on. But like more than anything, I just want like, listen, just strip past, just get past all that. Let me get them to the first page.
Yeah.
Get to the first page and forget everything else.
Should we
tell me what happens?
Should we have you read the first page here on the podcast?
Sure. After I've hyped it up so much.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, like I kind of had said earlier, like so much of more contemporary publishing is just kind of turned into like almost fast fashion. Like it's just like, let's crank out the next book. Let's get the next title and we'll attach these buzzwords to it. And I think so much of it is, you know, we've obviously found success, Tony more so than myself, but like within this like online book community. But so much of it is these just like short, watered down videos where like there's not much substantial discussion about the book. It's like it was this trope. It's this kind of like, you know, jargony sentence about what was going on or how the book made you feel. And you know, there's just so much within your, I don't really know where I'm going here, but you know,
he's feeling emotional.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's just a lot about your book that like kind of moves past all of that. And I think that's there's, you know, like Tony was saying, there's not many books where it's like something you're thinking about all day or wanting to get home. And you were just talking about wanting to grab the reader's attention. There aren't many books where when I'm reading it, like I don't want to put it down. There are a lot of books where I'm reading them and I'm enjoying it, but they just, and I tend to gravitate towards stuff that's a little bit more demanding, and it takes some work to get to the meat and the bones of the novel. And so sometimes it's like, okay, I like this, but I need to put it down.
Give yourself a mental break.
Yeah, and it was just with your novel, like I just didn't want to put it down. Like it was just so entertaining and you know, thought provoking. It really
you're gonna be glowing when you go out with your friends today. We're gassing you up here.
Yeah,
no, like my days started rough, but it's been improving.
All right, so if you don't mind, you don't mind, do you?
No,
okay.
No, I don't at all.
From the author himself, the first page of Pay As You Go.
Well, first thing first, there's the map.
I'll take some close-up shots when I get out. Yeah, don't worry about that.
Who designed the map?
Sarah Diamond. Big shout out to Sarah Diamond. She actualized it. I had an awful sketch, which I'll show you all for fun like afterwards. It's so bad. But I had the sketch, and then I knew what each neighborhood was going to be like. So I gave her the sketch along with some passages that were like describing everything. So hey, can you make this? She's an actual map maker, which I did not know was a job. Very cool. So
cartographer, is that what they're called?
Yes.
I think cartographer, like she hand draws maps.
Okay, is that different than like?
I don't know.
I don't know.
cartographer?
I don't know anything.
We
about
have
this.
we
I
have the
assume a
technology.
cartographer is using
It-
like technology to like map terrain.
The definition of a cartographer is a person who draws or produces maps.
Okay,
She's a
So
cartographer. All right.
Okay.
Shout out to her. All right. Let's without further ado here.
Okay, this is first chapter, of which I'll only read the first page. Electric Day. My first apartment in Polis, it was shit. Complete shit. I used to say to the man Calumet, "Hey, Calumet, how come we're here living like shit, huh?" Calumet would say, "What do you mean, shit?" And I would say, "I mean shit. I mean, look, the toilet isn't flushing properly, and the shitty paint job is peeling in all the wrong places. I swear, sometimes at night, pieces of paint are landing in my mouth and I wake up choking. There's never any juice in the fridge. And I don't like the sound of the doorbell. When the doorbell rings, it makes me jump. We should get a gentler doorbell is all. The windows are dusty and they don't look out onto anything. It's like the sky is never blue when I look out any of these windows. They're filtering out all the hope. The one in the living room looks out onto a wall. The stairway smells. There's a woman next door who hides when you see her, and I think she may be a fugitive. We only have one chair. If I'm sitting in the chair and someone else wants to sit, we have to argue about it. I like a few plants for the countertops, if that's not too much to ask. An orchid or something like that. Have you ever smelled an orchid, Calumet? And why is the TV remote always dead? I swear, it was just Tuesday that I bought new batteries for the TV remote, and now it's dead, and I had to get up if I want to change the TV channel like I'm some kind of a savage, and by the time I do that, someone has taken my seat in the chair. All the mirrors lie. The floor creaks. We have carpet instead of rugs. The microwave never heats up my food. I used to think, fine, it's not heaven or anything, but it's where the heart is. But here in this place, Calumet, it's like I can't quite hear my heart anymore. It's like my heart isn't feeling very welcome, and it's getting quiet like a guest who doesn't want to bother anyone. I feel meek. What's going to happen in the winter when the frost comes for us? I don't trust the radiator. Are you ready to lose a toe? You down for that, Calumet? What kind of a life is this? And then Calumet would say, ooh, for fuck's sake, man, you've only been here for a week.
Hell yeah. I thought that was great, man. That
Yeah,
put a
was
smile
awesome.
on my face.
Yeah,
I think the opening is, swearing in a book, you probably know this better than I do because you do this for a living, but like, I feel like that's one of those things it's hard to get right. It's like a sex scene almost. Like it's hard to get right.
Yeah, especially first sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was that ever a point of contention between the publisher or?
My dad told me that I should
Okay.
not have the like swag. So that was the only point. I was like, no, I think I'm going to keep it. Though I did listen to him on many other things.
So I think we're doing this interview a little backwards because normally we talk about like somebody's history and whatnot before you dive into their work. But we haven't talked at all about. You mentioned your father taught in New York. You're from Trinidad and Tobago. Did you grow up there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you kind of really move full time to the States?
17 for boarding school.
Okay, I think you had mentioned
and
that
then
earlier,
college
yeah.
after that. Yeah. No, but that's where I say I'm at this point. I've lived as much in the U.S. as there.
Sure.
But I say I'm from Trinidad. My family's there. My friends are there, and
This is a somewhat selfish question,
Yeah.
perhaps a bit ridiculous, and I'll maybe show my ignorance by asking it. You had mentioned earlier when people read like an immigrant story, they kind of pat themselves on the back. For that. A pet project that I'm kind of working my way through slowly is trying to read one book from every country in the world.
Well, that's different. That's admirable, actually.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words.
Not for the pat on the back purposes, but that's
No, and that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it just because at a certain point you kind of realize most of my reading life is just dead white guys, and whatever. I mean, there's a lot of great literature from dead white guys, but you want to learn a little bit more about other experiences, and for me, particularly when you're reading fiction, it's a fun way to learn about important events that happened outside of your country. A really great example that I always fall onto is A Case of Exploding Mangoes, which is by a Pakistani author, and it's about kind of the political situation in the 80s, and I just knew nothing about that. So,
amazing.
But one of the things I've really run into is to find books in English from people from other countries. A lot of times, it is a situation where maybe they moved here when they moved to the States when they were like 4 years old. And then you kind of start to go like, Does that count? Do I count
Do it
that?
count?
And then you start to feel gross for asking that question. You're you're kind of like putting people in these boxes. But I guess my question was, should I count you as a Trini author?
Please call me as a Trini author.
Okay, fantastic.
There you go.
Check it off the
If I get
list.
the A-OK from you. But
There we go.
to that end, is there any works from your country that you really, I think, are like must reads?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the top two are both by V.S. Naipaul. A House for Mr. Biswas. But if you want like an easier kind of like primer, that's a little bit more like comic. Miguel Street.
Okay.
And that's a book like I haven't read that in forever, but I bet you that in reading it, there are some through lines that will exist even in Pay As You Go or just my writing in general. I just read it so early that it was like so formative that it doesn't matter what happens after it will always kind of like be there. But yeah, it's just like a series of like, I guess today you call them interlinked short stories, but it's just chapters.
And then you sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What does your father teach, or what did he teach? And is this part of how you became a writer?
Okay, yeah. So to wind it all back, so I was actually born in the UK, and then we moved from there to the US for a little bit, and then I moved to Trinidad when I was like 3. Sorry if this takes away from my credentials.
No, because
you may have to read Naipaul.
Because to me, it's not necessarily about where you were born. It's about, I think, more than anything, like your formative years. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. But my parents, like born and raised. My dad, David Johnson. He is and was a professor. He's retired, but once you're a professor, you're kind of always a professor. Of African history in particular, but just really, from my point of view, just like a world knowledge, world history like specialist. There's hardly a region of the world that he can at least give you a primer, and if not a thesis in the form of a monologue. My mom, Dawn, was trained as an accountant in the English system as well, and eventually kind of like got higher and higher roles in financial, not financial organizations, but high finance roles in various organizations.
Sure,
like
Gotcha.
oil companies, so on. Anyway, and my mom as a kid, she like her mom would have to tell her to like go outside and like stop reading. Which I like bring up just because to emphasize just how important like reading and literature and had always been in my house. So I always also have a younger sister, Michelle. Big shout out there. 3 years younger than me.
Is she in New York as well?
She was in California. Now she's actually home in Trinidad. So I'm the one who's the straggler now. It used to be all of us were up here except for my mom. Now,
so your folks are
both my parents are back and Michelle as well. But anyway, so it just meant that like growing up, like, there were just like so many like books around the house. Our parents would like read us like stories to sleep and so on. Then my dad had this way of just kind of like speaking up. My dad just kind of would always just speak so powerfully and admiringly of just like great figures in African and world history. So I would just hear so much about like Nelson Mandela and Bob Marley and Martin Luther King, who have you, Eric Williams, the first prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And I would say like what a lot of these figures, if not all of these figures, like had in common was just like the power of like their language and the power of their words. Like when you think of MLK, you think of his speeches. When you think of Nelson Mandela, it was his vocalized politics. When you think of Bob Marley, you think of the poetry and the music. And I'm leaving out like so many other figures that my dad kind of could name for you at the tip of his tongue. But like, so growing up for us, like, after like dinner on like a Thursday nights, like instead of us getting free to like run upstairs and like watch TV, he might just like, start speaking about like Walter Rodney. But he doing it in such an entertaining, compelling way. So we be asking all of these like questions and so on. And just this notion of like language, the arts, as being something like powerful and world shaping and world forming. just really got ingrained in me at a very young age, before I even knew. And then he has a great reading voice as well. So during like bedtime stories, it was always like just super. My mom also does a great bedtime reading as well. But I just remember like from a very young age, I don't know if I asked this as a question, but it was a notion in my mind of like, well, where do the stories come from? And then you find out that it could be like your job to just make the stories. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll just do that.
I love it.
Sounds like a good job.
I was like, sweet deal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and then like, 30 years later, here we are. Who knew it would have taken that long? So like those were kind of like, so those are the formative ingredients I'd say inside the household. But then like Trinidad, as a whole, I think is like super important. Because we're such like a storytelling culture.
Cool.
I often kind of joke around, and this is mostly true. It's not entirely, but I say that when Americans run into each other or they like meet up, a lot of times they exchange information. It's like, oh, I read this thing and I heard this fact and so on and so forth, or what's your opinion on this one? And that's a greater proportion of conversation in America versus when Trinidadians meet up, we exchange stories. So you're like, boy, you won't believe who I ran into on the way here, and he was driving a thing, and boy, and he run off the road, and then a lady jumped out, and so on and so forth, right? So we have this way of whatever happens to you, from the mundane to the grandiose, it becomes fodder for just interconnectivity in terms of like sharing, and you quickly learn. The other thing I'll say is this. In the US, if you're telling a story to a group and it's a unentertaining, like a bad story, people will kind of like smile and be like, oh, that's so interesting. Y'all may even be doing this right now to me. I would have no idea, right? But in Trinidad, we don't do that. In Trinidad, we are very quick to tell you that you're wasting our time. Wow. I'm like, dog, like you call all of our attention for this long, drawn out story, it not going nowhere, I'm not laughing. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like so you like quickly learn to like not waste all your time. You learn what's funny. You learn what's worthy of being turned into a story at all.
Yeah.
And it varies from person to person. The same thing could happen to person A and person B. Person A could just be a better storyteller. They made that more entertaining. Others you have to like choose your lane. Like I might know, that's not a story I could tell I was good. So if someone else were there, be like, yo, tell them about what just happened.
Yeah.
Versus if it's something that's a little bit more in my wheelhouse, like, all right, well, first, what do I need to understand? Right? Is that I didn't have breakfast in the morning, okay?
Yeah,
etc. So that kind of like notion of like being aware of an audience and knowing what an audience might want or need, and like navigating their moods and taking care of their moods like along the way, I think is like very interesting to the way I think about writing.
I like that they're just like, no, stop talking.
Yeah.
Because like it's one of those things like there's always like you get sucked in that conversation. It's like how many times do I have to say, damn, that's crazy?
Yeah.
Before you're like, you
Before
figure
you
out
realize,
like this isn't going anywhere. It's not really that crazy.
Yeah, no. We won't do that. Like there'll be like someone would just start to like laugh, like dog, like no one is listening to you. Like, like straight up.
I do think it's true about American culture. People are definitely nicer to your face, but not necessarily like genuinely nice.
Yeah, it's easier to make kind of immediate kind of connections. Not so much in Trinidad. I think we could be a little bit more like hard to like approach. But like, when people, when they ride for you in Trinidad, they're really there for you.
Yeah. A good buddy of mine, well, actually, I've noticed this with a few of my friends that are from other countries. So I used to hang out with this guy from the Dominican quite a bit. And now I'm close with a guy from Azerbaijan, and which are two very different countries, but they both have the fact that they're very much not America in common. And both of them like my buddy Z from Azerbaijan was just like, dude, you're fat. He's like, you need to lose weight. And it's like, in his mind, he's not like making fun of me. He's just stating a fact. You know what I mean? So
factual information.
Yeah.
Do with it what you will.
Yeah. So like his mind, he's like doing the right thing because he cares. He's like, I want you to like take care of yourself. You know what I mean? Like, let's go get a salad. And I'm like, no, dude, let's go get pizza. So I'm a little annoyed just by how fucking talented you are. When I found out that you went to Harvard, I was like, what the fuck, dude? So obviously,
You're so nice too, damn it.
yeah, couldn't you be a prick? What the fuck?
Just turn the table over.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you a little bit about photography because that's kind of a passion and hobby of mine as well.
Yeah.
It looks like you do mostly film.
Yes.
And you shoot. What are you shooting?
As
on?
of
Malta?
recent. No, I don't have it here. Yes. XT1.
What a great.
How do you know that? Good.
I think I saw a photo of it.
Okay.
Yeah, on your Insta. I'm jealous because there's nowhere in New Hampshire that you could do like street photography. Really, I mean, New York is just like there's probably a million.
Yeah.
Interesting layers and textures and people and contrast with the buildings and
No,
So,
it's great. Sorry, I'm realizing I said the model wrong. I had a Fujifilm XT2. That's why I was saying that.
Okay,
but the Minolta is like a S10. I'll have to check, but it's one of those old ones.
So you used to shoot a little bit of digital then with the Fuji.
I did. That camera got stolen. That's the only reason why. Yeah, and I had that film just like lying around. Yeah. And then after the Fuji got stolen, I was like, okay, I might as well start using it. And now I love the film, so maybe it was a fortunate circumstance.
How'd you get into that?
Yeah, it was like so big shout out to David Ye. We'll have to tag in this as well. So I think I'd always in high school I took a photography class and I got a C. It's like the only C I got in high school.
Was your dad upset?
I think so. Yeah. It's just like, why give someone a C in photography? It's like, all right, whatever. I didn't snap the picture the way you wanted me to. But no, I wasn't good. But I had kind of like put that aspiration to the side. And then it was actually when I got to grad school in Iowa during my second year, there was a new first year, this writer named David Ye, who was multi-talented in a number of ways, but was just like an excellent photographer. And I'm talking about like within the first month of his arrival, everyone's like profile pics on Facebook changed to a David Ye picture because we would just all be hanging out at like parties and so on. And then apart from his great framing and like his actual photography like technique, his bedside manner, I guess is what you would call it. Like he was so, what's the word? Inconspicuous while taking pictures. So you would never know that these great pictures were being taken of you until all of a sudden on Facebook that like next day. So after seeing him having done that like for like a couple like months, I was just like, dude, like you have to like teach me how to do this. So he and I would just like walk around like Iowa like a few times and just like, talk about writing, talk about film, and then he just kind of like point at what he was seeing while taking pictures and try to like, pass some of that on to me. So my photography like did improve. I think I might have gotten a B in that high school class where I had to return now. So that's good to know. But yeah, it's like one of those things where like I think right now my skills aren't as good as they once. Like I think when I came to New York, I was like, again, when I came to New York, I know I said I moved after college, but then I left. After Iowa, I came back in 2017, and I've been here since. And when I arrived then, that's kind of when I feel as if I was like a little bit at my peak because I was like very actively kind of like searching, roaming. I was like working on the book and it made me just very aware of like the world and my circumstances. Now, like not so much. And I realized that if I want to be as good as the photographers I admire, again, keep the main thing. I just have to be out like shooting pictures all day, learning about so much more types of like film and lenses and like it's such a endless world.
I mean, it's just it's like any other art form, I guess. It just takes a long time to master the craft.
Yeah.
So
I
think the stuff I saw on your Instagram looks great. I thought.
Hey,
Did you?
Appreciate it.
I like the. I think it's on your website, maybe, or maybe it's in the back of the book. The photo of you in the chair. Is that a self-portrait or?
That was done by my girlfriend Kimberly Chang.
Oh, lots of shout outs today. Kimberly.
Yeah.
Nice
First
job.
name, last name. I had actually hired a professional to come in and take some pics, and she actually did a great job. And we were using some of those pics, I think, in the early like galleys and like so on.
Yeah.
But then just kind of like just one day, just having the film camera around there, I think we had just like cleaned the apartment. It just looked nice.
Yeah.
So hey, just like snap some of these, and she snap. And then just like some of those just came up. Like the one in the back was just like, I was like, this has to be the one.
Yeah. You look like a writer in that photo.
Yeah. But like you like don't want one that it's too much like, hi, I'm a writer. Like I think the most common pose is like this or like something like those I'm not too much of. Like if I think my hand is near my face and mine, but like
you just kind of look like relaxed. Like I'm a New York writer. Like,
there we go.
So you're just missing the tweed.
Yeah.
I think it's in here, isn't it? Let's take a look at it.
There's so many that's like that overly forced self retrospection.
Right. Oh, I have the
you're right there.
barefoot as well, which I was a big fan of. So that was just one of those like perfect little.
Is she a writer as well?
Accidents. No. And she would be the first to emphatically tell you no. But she reads and is much more multi-talented than I can ever dream of being.
That's a scary thought, Jesus. Well, that leads us to the last talent here, jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Does it? I hate the stereotype, but you know, Andy and I, we've been in the gyms a long time. Gunner as well.
Let's go.
I think a lot of times there's maybe a certain culture in jiu-jitsu that are people surprised when they find out you're a writer? Your jiu-jitsu family? Yes,
but I think most people are surprised when they find out I'm all right. If you've known me for a while in any other circumstance, like I have a friend, a recently made friend, like about like a year now, but like a good friend, and he's a writer. And he said like, you're like just like the least writerly writer I know, which I was like, thank you.
You gotta buck tradition sometimes. You know?
Yeah. But yeah. No, I don't think anyone kind of would normally expect it to be the first thing that comes out of my. But the great thing about jiu-jitsu is like everyone's so many things there. You know?
Yeah. Like I said, I don't want to pigeonhole. But do you ever like get someone like a rear naked choke and you like whisper like lines from your book into their ear?
Many years later, as he should be home. No. It doesn't really. I go there to not think about writing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I think as we like mostly do. Now it's just great for, just exercising like and stress sleep. But like while writing the novel, I said like I wake up early. I try to like get my writing done then, and then I'd aim for like an 11 o'clock or like a 12 o'clock class. Mm-hmm. So it was like the perfect transition from like kind of being in that really interior space to having to.
Man,
just,
I wish I didn't have a day job so I could go to like those.
Well, he has a day job. It's right
morning. Well, yeah, but your flex schedule is a little more flexible.
Yes,
I have an 8 to 4, and like there are a couple times where like I've had the day off and have gone to that like 10 a.m. class. It's the best.
It's the best.
The guys that go are killers but like the vibe
because
is
it's the ones who
it's
kind of
laid back. Everyone's
Yeah.
there to have a good time, but then they also just beat the shit out of you.
Yeah.
So what's like what kind of game do you have? Are you a guard puller? Are you more of a top game guy? Do you have a go-to submission?
I'm an ideally top game. The problem is that my like wrestling like isn't that good. So like
it's pretty common in jiu-jitsu though, honestly.
That is true. That is true. So
no offense. Someone's gonna kick my ass when I leave.
No, it's like super true. Like honestly, truly, like if I could have like just done wrestling as like a kid and then like learned this after, way better. It's way better to like grow up with judo or wrestling, then learn.
Is wrestling a viable sport in Trinidad? I know it's not really in some countries. Like they just don't have it.
There's a great mixed martial arts community. So I guess like by nature of that, and anytime I go down there, I like roll with like those guys because
but it's not common for like a high school to have a wrestling team there.
No. Now I was on like the JV wrestling team for 2 years in high school when I first like came to America, right? I told you I finished off like boarding school here, but like 2 years of JV wrestling isn't like
it's not the same.
Like who cares, right? Like so like, I like now what I can do is this: if you cannot wrestle at all, I could give you the impression that I can wrestle,
sure,
and I could probably like take you down. But if you've done like even just 4 years of like high school wrestling and and you feel it straight away, you like tie with people like, I should pull guard, or just give them a real hard time to take me down.
You look like you would have a really mean triangle choke.
Yes,
and I bet you do knee on belly quite a bit. Is that your go-to?
If I could get to knee on belly, it's probably on the way to taking your back.
Okay.
Oh, I like
If
that.
I take the back, I put on a body lock.
Yeah, body triangle.
And it's like a wrap.
Yeah.
If I get there, then I'm like already thinking of like my next role.
You're more of a
my next role.
Yeah.
nogi guy, or you in the gi a lot?
Nogi.
Nogi.
No, I do both, but I prefer nogi.
That's my jam.
Yeah. No, it's great. And like so for my ideal like role or match would go like we like square up, get you in like a front headlock, sprawl out so you fall. Then I drive, get on top of like half guard, flatten you out, get the underhook, slide to side control or on mount. And if I get you in mount, then I start to attack the arm. You're going to turn over to defend that arm, get you in the gift wrap, do a chair sit to take the back, put on the body lock, rear naked.
If you ever end up at Handle Gracie in New York, folks, you got to watch out. Yeah. You know the game plan now.
Yeah.
But the sign of a really good jiu-jitsu practitioner or any martial arts is when you know what they're going to do and you still can't stop them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is how I felt most of the time.
That's how I feel all the time.
Yeah, no, man. Like it's and that's just another thing. There's like so many levels to it.
Yeah.
At one point, I was like, I need to start doing more jiu-jitsu and go to practice more, and then my joints started to hurt, and I was like, this is why people do the steroids, and I was like, listen, I could either become, pretty good at jiu-jitsu but never great, or I could use that same effort and energy into like my main thing.
Keep the main thing the main thing.
There was one time I was rolling, and I was just it was myself and another white belt, and I was just kind of flailing around, and I think I had gotten mount, and after the end of the round, he was like, "Were you trying to work on anything?" And I was like, "Not really."
Like survival?
I was like, I've gotten an arm triangle before, and it felt cool, so I was trying to do that again. But like, if you asked me if I was specifically working on any part of the game, no. Like, I was just trying to get into a good position while simultaneously trying to remember what we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah. No, I think like you've been at it for like a few months,
like 8 or 9 months.
So like the first year or like year and a half, it's really just like downloading, like like when kids, like when babies start to speak, they're like just babbling, because they're hearing all the sounds, and they know if you make sounds that kind of look like this, then things like this might happen. That's kind of like what it is. So like you're learning all of these like techniques, and here's arm and omoplata, and like realistically, like you're not gonna do any of them,
right?
But you learn what they look like, what they feel like, what the positions look like that might get you there, and you like kind of just babble for a bit until like then there comes that day or two where like you see the like setup and oh my gosh, and then you do it and it's like oh my, it's like speaking your first like sentences,
right?
So you're right where you
it's funny.
You're on track.
It's funny. I've recently switched to a new school, and I'm enjoying it a lot better.
That's key.
But one of the things that there's one con about it, and the downside is they have a great, really developed kids program. So there's just going to be so many kids. They're going to be able to just kick my ass before they can legally drink, and it's just like
it's like I saw when I was like 25, and I was like, gosh, I wish even later than that, like 27.
Yeah,
I was just like, gosh, I wish I'd started when I was like 7. Like,
I had wanted to get into it for a while, and unfortunately, when the seed was like first planted, it was when I was still working in the fitness industry and was training in the gym pretty frequently, and it's just so hard to have two physical hobbies or activities or whatever at the same time. And at the time, I was still really like gung-ho in the weightlifting and strength training side of things.
I'm curious about that actually.
And now that I'm out of that, like it's just like I stepped out away from that for a while, and it was just like, now I want to go do something else. I want to start over, and I want to suck and learn and try to figure things out. And that's
to like suck at something.
It feels so good.
Yeah.
Because I was hitting that point where I was towards maybe not so much, but approaching the end range of my like genetic strength. And, I also having worked in the industry, I was getting a little burnt out. I felt like I was spending just all of my time in a gym around weights, things like that. And just kind of going through the motions and felt like there wasn't much left to learn in terms of my own training.
Gotcha.
And so it just so refreshing to start over.
And a sport which you will never feel that way.
Right. And to start at zero and know that like you just said, like you're always going to be able to learn more.
Yeah. No, that's 100% it. Yeah.
We all know, the three of us know each other from the gym.
I was about to say, yeah. So what's the swole story?
So I used to be a powerlifting and Olympic style weightlifting coach.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I opened my own gym in 2015. And Gunnar was one of my athletes. Gunnar actually used to be one of the best weightlifters in New England.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he competed at the national level a few times. Won the bronze.
And what is the difference? This is something I feel like I always want to know. What is the difference between powerlifting and Olympic lifting?
The best way to describe it, I mean, obviously, there's three different events in powerlifting: the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. And then Olympic style weightlifting, which we just call weightlifting, is the snatch and the clean and jerk.
Okay.
And so, the best way to think of it, it's like kind of like rugby versus football. They're very similar, but they're not exactly the same. There's some crossover in the skills and physical attributes. But so I opened my own gym in 2015, coached a bunch of people. I mean, we had a lot of like general fitness clients.
Okay.
Gunnar actually won the bronze medal at Collegiate Nationals in 2014, 15, back when both of us were much skinnier. I had a bunch of health issues, got fat, sold the gym. Now
Healthy. Well, you got
I got well insulated.
well fed on life.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
And Andy was one of the coaches at the gym.
I actually before I started working at the gym, I met Tony because I was looking for coaching.
Oh, gotcha.
And I was, at the time that I had started going to him for coaching, I was in school. My degree is in exercise science. So I had to do an internship for that degree. I had been training under Tony for a little bit less than a year. And I was like, hey, I have to do this thing. Can I do it at your gym over the summer? And he was like, great, that sounds awesome. And then it turned into a full-time role, and it was great until it wasn't.
Yeah, I sold him out. He was working there when I sold it, and I was like, good luck, buddy. Yeah, so that's how we all know each other. So if you if you need some tips on building some strength,
I mean, yeah, I'm telling you, like some of these people are just so strong out there. I'm just like, I need to get stronger.
Yeah, I mean, we call that sometimes people are just they're just freaks, so, I mean, you can train and you can always improve from where you're at, but if you're just not naturally gifted with it, you can only reach a certain level. Let's not take up too much more of this gentleman's time. We didn't talk about major influences too much, so I guess we'll do the shotgun style, like Desert Island top 5 books. What are you bringing with you?
Speedboat by Renata Adler.
I keep meaning to pick that up.
You got to.
Now I have to. I have to. All right. As soon as there's another NYRB sale.
Well, we're going to the bookstore after this. Yes.
You're right.
NYRB in general, whatever they put out, I just trust.
They rarely miss, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Mackerel.
Yes.
Perfect island book as well. I'm saving my most obvious for last. So Speedboat, Mackerel. Elena Ferrante, those Neapolitan novels, like I'll just count them as one. Like that 4-part series, that would make excellent island reading. Pure echelon as well. Like first few pages, I'm like, you got this. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, 2 more. Well, 1 more. Maybe.
1 more, because we all know what number 1 is, right?
Yeah. Desert. Okay, because it's an island. Anna Karenina.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. And that's the book that, like, if ever I'm speaking to like a young or like a newer writer and they want advice, I guess. that's the number one novel that I like recommend for like aspiring like writers to like read.
Okay.
I like that.
Not because it's my favorite, although if it's your favorite, hands down, no argument at all.
Right. I don't
like,
think someone's gonna bat an eyelash at that. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Like you like can't argue against someone for that.
You like Tolstoy?
like
Yeah.
get
Right.
over it. But it's that quintessential book that like I think it just teaches you kind of like patience. It shows you how with just like the simplest of ingredients of just like plain, straightforward sentence after sentence, you can build like such beautiful, elaborate like structures. And it's just so like penetrating into like the human condition, if you will. And yeah, like it's so enjoyable. It's so long, but it's so enjoyable, and it's just super like instructive. And I read it while I was like working on this, and it's not to say like the prose or anything like really informed it, but it's just like reading it, you like just feel how patient of a author he was, and it lends you patience and it lends you courage to know that like it's worth taking your time to make something that lasts. And 100 Years of Solitude.
Nice.
The best.
The best. That's
The
a,
best.
you know, again, another pick that no one's gonna, you know, be like,
Can't
what
argue.
the heck, you know.
Yeah.
And if you try, I will win that argument.
And then,
I actually want to interject real quick.
Oh, sure, go for it.
I had a shotgun question of my own, because one of my desert island books was someone that you recognized in your acknowledgments, and that is Jorge Luis Borges.
Ah, yes.
And I would love to know what some of your favorite stories of his are.
Ooh. I have some sleepers, like ones I don't hear mentioned at all. There's one called Brody's Report. And it's this fictional account of this Scottish missionary who lived amongst this like imagined tribe for like a few days. As with all Borges stories, this like maybe like 4 or 5 pages. And it's just his account of like living with these like tribespeople who by any measure are like quite savage. But they're like such these achingly harshly rendered in their brutality and in their rare moments of like beauty. One example is this. He says that amongst the people, sometimes it will occur to one of them to speak a poem. And their language is like quite basic, but somehow they're able to combine this arrangement of words. And one of them, they like can't control themselves and they'll like blurt it all out. And if the poem is successful, everyone recoils in awe and shock. And that person can no longer, like, you're no longer allowed to lay eyes upon that person. And they all turn away and shun. And that person has to go and live in exile for the rest of their lives because their poem was so perfect.
Wow.
So goals.
So, Tony, there's another person telling you need to read Borges. It's not just me anymore.
Yeah.
Gotta get on it.
Other ones, The Gospel According to Mark, Borges and I. That's one where he
that's a
meets
great
his
one.
own self. The Aleph, obviously. And then, do you have the Andrew Hurley?
Yes, the collected fiction. The whole thing, yeah.
That entire first section, A Universal History of Iniquity.
That's a really interesting one.
And it's so strange in that book that's the first ones that you read because it makes you think, oh, here's what Borges is like.
Right.
But it's so
so
unlike.
different.
It's so different.
I remember I had that exact reaction because I read that section and I was like, okay, like I've
What's
heard
everyone
these
talking
things
about?
I've heard these things about Borges, but like these are interesting, but like is this really what it's all about?
Yeah.
And then up next is Ficciones.
Yes.
And it starts with Tlon to Akbar. The exact title is escaping me, but like,
and then you're like, what the fuck is going on?
exactly.
Yeah,
And that is the exact reaction I had. Is like, what the?
Yeah.
And I think I had to put it down for a bit after that. I was like, I don't think this is what I was expecting. And then a few months later, I picked it up, and it's just, it's magical. I'm very partial to Circular Ruins.
Yes.
This is one of my favorites.
Yes.
And then The Form of the Sword.
I know the name. I can't remember.
It's the story he's telling the story of how he got the scar on his face.
I'll have to go back.
I don't want to talk about it too much on the air because I don't want to spoil the actual ending, but
Okay.
Those two I think are my favorites.
Okay. There's one more. I can't remember the name. I think it was like Two Labyrinths or something like that. It's like a page long. And I could tell the entire thing. Obviously, Borges will do it better than I am about to. But it's these like two kings, and one king goes to visit the first one, and the first king is like, well, let me show you my labyrinth that my architects have built. And he shows the other king inside. And for like days upon days, or maybe hours upon days, this king is like wandering, he's lost, he's confused, he doesn't want to ask for help, and he eventually kind of like makes his way out, but his pride isn't allowing him to like say anything. And he's like, oh, okay, like cool maze, when you come to visit me, I'll show you mine. So it says, so done. Like a month later, the first king goes to visit the other one, and then he like ties him to a horse, rides out to the middle of like the desert, and leaves him there. And it's just like, yeah, like here's my maze.
Yeah,
try to find your way out. Anyway, that actually informed the moment in the book as well.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah. When Rosa was saying, when she was speaking of with Osman, and when the cousin sent her back to, let me quickly read the line, only because it's Borges inspired.
Did you pick up on this, Andy?
I did not.
Well, you were not a true Borges fan.
No, there are definitely bigger Borges fans than I am.
Oh, look, you have it marked.
Oh, this
I
is
haven't
it.
marked. How about that?
Andy, I mean. Oh, Osman, I would say, my prince, don't you see this is my last stop on the road? When the girls found out what he was up to, they took away his legs, then sent me back to that other prison forever, one of endless terrain, devoid of walls, with no gates and no locks, where the only escape would have been to let go and allow the lightless pits to claim me forever. And that's a very directly Borges inspired line from that story
Interesting.
that I just said.
I do remember reading that, being like, "This is metal." Anything else you have? Because we need to wrap this up so this guy can enjoy his Saturday evening.
Okay, I have one more quick question. Because I'm always very interested in epigraphs, and I think it's something that I think is very interesting. What leads an author to choose a particular one, trying to figure out how the epigraph relates to the novel that follows it, or the chapter that follows it, or whatever. We don't necessarily have to get too in depth with the actual meaning behind it, because it's fairly obvious if you read the epigraph and you follow the book. But I would love to know what your favorite Nas album is.
Ooh, Illmatic.
Yeah.
I mean,
You can't go wrong.
it's hard to argue any other.
Yeah. We were actually talking about
And
this.
that song,
Yeah.
NY State of Mind, is the...
We were talking about it on the way up, because I was listening to Illmatic earlier in the week, and I looked it up, and I was like, he released this when he was 19.
Yeah.
No,
that's...
nothing makes you feel like you've kind of missed your shot. Like seeing that
there's a mixtape that you could find. I'm sure if you just go on YouTube, but it was a mixtape he put up when he was like 17.
Yeah.
And most of the songs turn into what's on Illmatic. So you're hearing him rap at 17, and it's like, just imagine, like, it came out when he was 19, but that is 17-year-old rap written. Yeah.
So we
crazy.
need to pick a winner of the free copy of the book. Did you bring it with you?
No.
Yeah, we fucked up, because we should have brought it so he could sign it, and then we could give it. All right. Well, we'll figure this out. But before we do that, before we pick the winner, I did my final question. What's next?
Ooh. I would like to write nonfiction for a while.
Interesting.
I think the process of writing this novel really required that I kind of sequester myself. I had to retreat from the real world in order to make another one that speaks to it. But there's so much more to say than I have time to wait 5 years to say it every now and then.
Yeah.
Any particular topics in mind?
Yeah, I mean, through the course of this, I end up doing more research about the housing crisis in New York than I had done before, and it's absurd to the point of tragedy.
Have you read Matthew Desmond's books?
I can already say no, but
His most recent one's called Poverty by America.
oh, those ones. No,
And then
I
his
have
previous
not,
one
no.
was Evicted, which is mostly about
Okay.
what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
I think that's his name. Anyway.
no, but I know the book you mean for sure. But I'll add that onto my forever growing list. Yeah, there's that. I just I like have thoughts about like AI and billionaires. And I'm not quite sure what it is. Those the thoughts are. There was a writer who I can't recall the name, but I think she said, "I write to find out what I think." So it's not that I have it beforehand. I'm gonna like untangle it on the page. But it seems to me like the promise of the internet has always been that we will be able to better like see and understand and find each other. And for every phase that we try to, or for every new space that we evolve in the internet to do just that, it's only a matter of time until like these like large conglomerate forces kind of like come and like digest everything. And I think AI is going to be that on like a scale that we just really can't imagine. And that, yeah, there'll be some cool plus sides, but I just don't, experience has taught me to like not be totally optimistic about what lies ahead.
A somewhat somber ending to
Yeah.
otherwise lively podcast.
But read the first page of the book and
Really?
get started.
I mean, I'm always a big fan of screaming into the void. So, yeah. All right, let's pick a winner for the free copy of Pay As You Go. So, how many entries did we have, Gunnar?
Total or just ones from Instagram?
Total.
That's going to be 29.
Ooh.
That can't be right. There's 56 comments on the Instagram post itself,
So you had the pictures you sent me from Instagram
and the comments,
and the comments.
Andy, Andy.
Do some live counting.
All right, well, we're gonna have to postpone.
This is our research analyst, everybody.
All right, we'll do this retroactively. So at some point, I'll put them all into a list.
Oh.
I will randomize it. But right now, give me a number between 1 and 160.
17.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Whoever is in the 17th slot, I'll tag that at the. I'm going to go home in my bedroom. I'm going to be like, all right, we got so and so.
Hey.
All right. Anything else?
I got nothing.
Look, go pick up a copy of Pay As You Go anywhere where you enjoy purchasing your books. And if you read the first page, I guarantee you will read the second. Eskor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
for
very much.
having
Thank
me.
you for the hot dogs. Those were
Yeah,
delicious.
of course. Grades papaya, shout out.